technologies. I've been coming to this exhibition for eons, and you will probably already have noticed something, that it was much the same as last year. You've got people selling the same old LMSs, the same old content, text, graphic, multiple choice question. You've got the people throwing in a bit of gamification, as if condescending adults is the right way to go in our industry. I don't buy it. I don't buy it, folks. I think it's all presentation, and we're abandoning learning principles rather than helping people to learn. Walk around this exhibition and ask yourself what's different from 10 years ago, and you won't be able to tick many boxes, okay? And I think that's a shame, because I think this industry needs to move on a little bit, and perhaps we need to do and look at what the rest of the IT world is doing and the rest of industry is doing. And that really comes down to two letters, in my opinion. So for the last 2 years, I've been investing personally in AI companies, built an AI company, been involved in research in AI, talking nothing about this, because, let's face it, AI is actually an existential threat to our species. It's not a trivial thing. And to imagine that artificial intelligence will have no impact in learning is patently absurd. Patently absurd. Because it's already been active among your learners. Every single one of your learners uses Google, and what is Google? Nothing but AI. Nothing but AI. If you use social media, all that social learning, everything in your timeline is delivered by AI. Your world of Netflix, if you buy a book on Amazon, it's AI driven. So it's already soaked into your learners, baked into the cake. Now what I'm going to do is concentrate a little bit of introduction, then give you some real examples of how AI can be used in learning, in online learning, right? So real practical examples here. I'm going to start with a lesson. In November the 8th, I was in Philadelphia teaching at the University of Pennsylvania, okay? Ivy League college, an audience about this size, and that morning was the morning of the Trump-Hillary election. And I used this slide. I thought I'd show you it again. And I said to the audience that Trump would win. And remember that Hillary was 10, 15 points ahead. Nobody thought that Trump was going to win. But the reason I said that was I had gathered data from a couple of sources. One was an AI engine called Mog AI. It's an Indian AI engine. And another one was harvesting data from social media for a friend of mine, Steve Racing. And we both thought that Trump would win. And he won, much to the astonishment of the people the next morning. And when I came in the next morning, oh, how they laughed when when I said that Trump would win. But there's an important lesson here. Why did the polls get it wrong? Because they're using Alexander Graham Bell, that old Scots guy's technology. They're using the telephone. Have you ever phoned up a 15-year-old to try and get marketing data from them? They're not interested. We must start harvesting data in a different way. And I think the e-learning industry is really stuck in the telephone mode still in terms of technology. We're not really moved on beyond that old client-server LMS content thing. Okay? Now, if you do a comparison, just to prove my point how the rest of the world has moved on, these are companies 10 years ago, 2006, ExxonMobil, General Electric, Gazprom, Citigroup, Bank of America, Royal Dutch Shell, BP. By market cap, who are the biggest companies in the world now, 2016, end of last year? Apple, Alphabet, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook. And all of those companies are essentially AI companies. If you speak to the chief exec of any of those companies, they will say that AI is an essential part, if not the core strategy for their company going forward. Okay, the biggest tech companies in the world. And then if you dig down a little bit, so every year, Boston Consulting Group come up with a list of the most innovative companies in the world. And look at the list: Apple, Google, Tesla, Microsoft, Amazon, Netflix, Samsung. Everyone, perhaps from Toyota, is essentially an AI-driven company. Every single one of them. They've bet the whole house on IBM, on Watson. To ignore this in our industry would be lunacy. Okay, and there are some new kids on the block, really, in terms of learning masters, or the people who are doing things in the real world here. Several years ago, when the MOOCs came out, I did Sebastian Thrun's MOOC on AI. His company, I remember at the time I gave talks in universities, and everybody said MOOCs will not work, they won't succeed. How much do you think Udacity's market cap is today? Anybody? $1 billion. $1 billion. This is not going away. And he's an AI guy by background, head of research, self-driving cars guy. These guys, Page and Brin, biggest company, second biggest company in the world. What do you think their degrees were in? Pure AI. AI guys, changed your learners forever. Google was essentially the biggest pedagogic shift we have ever seen in our industry. And that was AI driven. It's been there for ages. We have Salman Khan. Go and look at Khan Academy, the millions of young people who use that. Where do you think Salman came from? He's a mathematician. What do you think Khan Academy are starting to do? Get adaptive AI learning into their system. It's no longer just a database of videos. Then we have Nick and Kohler from Coursera, perhaps the biggest MOOC company in the world. What do you think their degrees were in? Pure AI. These are the new kids on the block. AI is the new kid on the block, and it's going to change things quite considerably. But we have a problem, because in our culture, Western culture, it's not everybody's culture, we're deeply dystopian about technology. So this goes back to the Greeks and Prometheus. We have this guy who gives us fire, who gives us technology, writing, mathematics, and we screw it up. So Zeus punishes him by tying him to a rock, and he gets his liver pecked away for eternity. And this really has influenced everybody's minds here. You know the Frankenstein myth, Mary Shelley, deep in our culture. The Prometheus myth, you know that technology is dangerous. We create something that will come back to bite us in many ways. And of course, if you look at the movies we all watch, by and large, AI is represented as robots that are going to kill us while we sleep. You know, actually, AI has got hardly anything to do with that. It's one area of AI, but most AI these days is in the cloud and it's networked. It's got nothing to do with robots. The more frightening thing is the sort of HAL type thing that many of you remember. I'm sorry, Dave, I'm afraid I can't do that. That's slightly threatening networked, cloud-based internet stuff. Okay? Now, why will AI be important, and why do I think AI will not... Actually, AI is quite simply possibly going to wipe out a lot of training anyway, because if AI and robots and other things do things that human beings do, there's no need to train the human beings. If it's true that AI will decimate the legal profession, the accountancy profession, middle management, as I think it will, we will have far less training anyway. Think upon that one for a minute and the effect it'll have in the industry. But I want to focus on this for a minute, the brain. This is what you do for a living. You try and improve this thing. That's all you do. Okay, let's get clear. But it's a really terrible and awful organ. It takes about 20 years to train this thing to become even remotely useful in the workplace. It forgets almost everything you try and teach it. It's full of biases. Almost everyone's brain here is both sexist, racist, and we've got about 50 to 100 types of cognitive and social bias. It gets demotivated. I used to teach 16-year-old kids maths. Believe me, it took about 3 seconds for them to be demotivated when teaching that subject. It sleeps 8 hours a day. If you have skills, I can't download your skills into my brain, but if you were AI and I were AI, I can do it in a fraction of a second. I can't network as a brain. And here's the big one. The damn thing dies. It's gone. You know? AI doesn't die. It only gets better and better and better. That's what machine learning is. Remember machine learning? Bear in mind that word. So why has AI hit us big time now, right now? Well, it's been around for about 2.5 millennia. The first algorithm was written by Euclid in 300 BC. We've had 2,000 years of maths, folks. But now is the time because we didn't have the data. Okay? So AI was a bit like a rocket. We got plenty of maths, good algorithms, deep learning, but we didn't have enough data as fuel. Suddenly, the World Wide Web comes along, standing on my brain there. The World Wide Web comes along, and we get a tsunami of data. And that's the fuel that makes this stuff work. So I did this last night. I'll just show you me taking off in my rocket there. Don't worry, it's not going to take off. Now I'm going to relate this back to what you guys do for a living here, training, okay? There are several things, if you've ever taught as a teacher or training, that you will know will be competencies, okay? You want to be able to answer questions that students have got, give them support, have good subject matter knowledge, create and teach courses, adapt to the needs of different learners, and assess them. By and large, that's the kit and caboodle here. Let me show you how AI can help you here. The first one is answering questions. Well, we already know that Google was one algorithm. See that little algorithm that's PageRank? That algorithm was worth about $10 billion. That little bit of mathematics, it's just a Bayesian equation, which an 18th century English pastor wrote long time ago. But all of the access to this stuff comes through Google, and that's an AI access mechanism. So bear that in mind. AI is already what your learners use. I want to show you this one. Teachers hate this thing. Kids love it. Why? Because if you've got a kid who's stuck with their maths homework at night, as you probably all were at one point, you simply point your mobile, it can be handwritten or printed, to the maths question, and the app, which is free, gives you the answer. Now, if you're 12 years old, how cool is that? You can see why teachers hate it. But actually, teachers are wrong, because if you click on the steps thing, it gives you the steps between the question and the answer, which is where all the maths teaching takes place. It's the subject I used to teach. It's where all the action is. So this is a huge leap forward for all those kids who get stuck and whose parents can't give them help with homework, which is why most kids have downloaded that one. If we go to Stanford, there are people like this, a great team, Chris Peach. He has taken the data, 1.4 million answers from Khan Academy in maths, built an AI engine that predicts what the child will answer next. This is interesting because it's up to 8.85 in probability in predicting exactly what the child will do next. This matters when you teach maths, because if you know what the child's doing wrong or right, you can adjust the learning to that individual. No teacher gets this level. This is better than a teacher. And then, of course, we have something interesting. Before Christmas, I bought one of these in my house. So when I get up in the morning and have a coffee, I say Radio 4, Alexa Radio 4, it plays me Radio 4. And whenever an idle thought comes into my mind, I'm traveling to Belgrade next week, for example. So yesterday I said, Alexa, Wikipedia, Belgrade. And it starts reading the Wikipedia page on Belgrade for me. You can shove maths questions at it. You can even train this thing around your company's domain and have it in the middle of your board table. We're looking at that with a pharmaceutical company, training it up on a clinical domain. But this whole thing here, all these companies are looking at voice. Why is that important in teaching? Well, most of what we learn is social, but not on a screen. It's actually that old Socratic conversation thing. So when Pillions, who was a Scots guy, invented the blackboard, it was the worst ever invention for trainers and teachers, because they all started turning their back on learners and scribbling things up on the board, when actually what they needed to be doing is talking to people. Now you have machines in your own home that you can talk to and ask questions of and teach yourself from. This is revolutionary. And it's getting better and better all the time. When it comes to student support then, so that's the first thing, asking questions, getting answers. Let's look at student support. How many are on Twitter here? Okay, that's about half. If you've got more than 100 followers on Twitter, you will almost certainly have a whole number of bots that you think are real people, but aren't really. So my son works in digital marketing. He does this for a living. But there are loads of marketing companies that are pretending to be people, but they're not really. So you already have been a victim of the bot phenomenon without realizing it if you're using Twitter. But there's a more important reason why we should pay attention to bot world. And that's in applications like Duolingo, where you're learning a language, absolutely free. Getting on for 200 million people using this, market cap of $500 million. You'll be able to chat to learn a language. As we speak, there are thousands of English school children sitting in classes trying to learn German, Spanish, and French, and they will leave school after 8 years of doing that and won't be able to order a cup of tea in a restaurant, because you don't learn a language by sitting in a classroom. You marry somebody who speaks the language, you go and live there, but you immerse yourself in the language and you practice it. You don't sit with a room of 30 other kids who can't speak the language as well. So we're looking at some things here. But the bot thing has absolutely exploded, and don't think this is the future, this is here now. We have Cortana, we have Siri. If you've got an iPhone, Viv is like a souped-up Siri. Those are the people who wrote this, bought by Samsung. Duolingo, Amazon's got bots, Google's got bots. You can train bots on Facebook Messenger. This is the interesting one, though. This is Tay. launched by Microsoft a year and a bit ago. They had to take it down because kids are smart. They knew it was a bot, and they trained it to become a sex-crazed Nazi. So whenever you went to CT on Twitter or whatever, it said the most horrific things, even beyond Donald Trump, believe me. That's because kids are smart. They know that bots are just bits of software and you can train them. They're not, they're not stupid. Of course, the Daily Mail went apeshit. For me, it was just a sign that, kids are a bit switched on this thing. But this is the really interesting one. So at Georgia Tech, which is a high-end college in America, they were running an AI course. These are smart, straight-A kids, no artificial intelligence. The faculty decided to swap out one of the teaching assistants, the real people, for a bot, a piece of AI. Very interesting. And the reason they did that is the students every semester have 10,000 emails that they send to the academics. There's no way the department's going to cope with 10,000. And if you've been running any sort of social learning thing, you'll know that this is a tsunami of stuff. So they decided to take 4 semesters worth of data, 40,000 questions, fill and train the bot with this thing, and then set the threshold high. And not one of the students guessed it was an AI. Not one student. They thought it was a teacher. In fact, they thought it was better than the teacher. Why would that be? Well, have you ever been on an academic course and submitted an essay? How long does it take to get the essay back? Days? Weeks? An email to an academic, average time getting back? Hours? Days? This was coming back so quickly, they had to slow it down. They actually had to slow down the software to make it seem more real. Of course, a couple of kids were catching on by now. But the amazing thing was, the kids put it up for a teaching award. So how weird is that? So if anybody comes back to you and says, AI will have no effect on teaching at all, no, that's sacrosanct. It will wipe out bankers, lawyers, accountants, middle managers, the entire manufacturing world, but it won't affect teachers. Bullshit. Bullshit. Okay? So you can see one of the students nominating it here. They were starting to guess. Okay, so that's support. Duolingo. If you really want to see how AI works with a very practical free example, download this, use it. It gives you a feel for some of the techniques. And if you don't think management or middle managers are going to be affected, in the Harvard Business Review, we had a really deep analysis of what you as people and managers, I used to do that for a living, do. And about 57% of your time is just admin. If you're a teacher, about 60% of what you do is admin. If you're an online tutor, about 60% is admin. And that's the bit that can be swept away with good help from AI. Okay, let's look at subject matter knowledge now then. In the last document to come out of the White House before Obama left, this is the last thing produced by the White House and Obama, Preparing for the Future of Artificial Intelligence. I highly recommend you read this. Brilliant document. When I started reading it, I was astonished. Because recommendation 3 and 4 were that we should use artificial intelligence in student learning outcomes and in training programs. I thought, wow, that guy switched on. But he had a very good reason for including it in this report, and that was a big trial in the American Navy where they took skills and expertise for people who had been doing it for 7 to 10 years, captured it with AI, and used that in an intelligent tutoring system to teach people in a 16-week course. So 7 to 10 years versus 16 weeks. And the 16-week people were outperforming the 7 to 10-year people. Then that's where Obama went, wow, this thing really has efficacy. It really does work. Okay, if we want to go and create and teach courses, now, I used to run a company, that company over there, Leo, was called Epic. I started that company, I was the chief executive of that company for years. And for years I sold you e-learning at £20,000 an hour. And I made a lot of money doing that, in fact. But I almost feel like apologizing because that's unsustainable. It's unsustainable to pay that level of money for basic content. So a couple of years ago, we set to try and solve that problem. And we now have a whole load of clients, especially in pharmaceuticals, NHS, PwC, and so on, who are doing the following. So imagine a world where you don't spend $20,000 or pounds for e-learning, but you give me a document, I give it to an AI engine, I press a button, and it produces the e-learning in a second. Okay? A tenth of the cost, minutes, not months. It takes months to make this stuff, okay? But still high retention quality content. because that's what we've managed to do now. So give me a document, PowerPoint, podcast, or video. If you give me a video, I take the transcript, which is produced automatically on YouTube, and use that to create the content, okay? And what it does is it takes a semantic engine. This is one little area of AI, one tiny area. It looks at that document and goes, what are the main learning points? And it automatically produces questions on that content. Okay, so this is a nurse's video, 2.5 minutes, on analogy test. Every nurse in Britain has to do this. But if you just show the nurse the video, there's certain things they never get. One is this question here. How many days did you as a patient go if you take any antihistamines in? And the answer is 4. But when you watch the video, you hardly ever remember the number 4. It's more semantic information, chatty information you remember. So it produces all that e-learning automatically on mobile tablets or whatever. Not only that, if you're a nurse and you have to type in negative control, because one of the pinpricks that blisters up is a negative control, you don't know what that is, it will automatically produce a link out to Wikipedia, YouTube, whatever, to give you supplementary content. Remember, there's no designer here. This is an AI engine doing this automatically, okay? Not only that, when it goes off to Wikipedia, it'll give you some stuff. It can actually create e-learning using the Wikipedia page as well in real time. So if you did want to test them in that, you just open the variable up and it will test them on the Wikipedia page and create e-learning in real time for them. No designer, okay? Now the reason I've focused very much on healthcare, I don't know how many people here are from healthcare, is at the end of it, each learning experience, you get a sort of green, amber, red. Green you know, amber you sort of know, red you didn't know. And one of the things that really annoys me, having worked in medical training for a long time, is the 70 to 80% pass mark. I don't want a mother turning up at A&E and hitting a nurse who got 80% on meningitis, because the other 20% is going to kill that child. I want 100% competence. And if you've got e-learning compliance courses where the pass mark is 70%, what the hell are you playing at? Design the course so that they get full competence. So you get looped around this thing until you get 100%, okay? So you get your 100%, but that's not the end. I then go off to IBM Watson and curate content. So it's all very well doing that more direct training. You know, you've got to get the basic knowledge to perform that task. But there's other stuff in learning. There's a whole world out there. So the course is porous. It goes and finds things, curates the top 10 YouTube videos, the top 2 TED Talks, the most relevant things to that domain. But it does it, it curates using artificial intelligence. Why would any trainer imagine that they're going to personally curate content? You've got Google, well, all you do is go into Google anyway. Let the AI do that work for you. It will be better, it will give you a rating on relevance, it will do all sorts of things that your human brain will not be able to do. And then finally, spaced practice. You've already forgotten most of what I've said over the last 20 minutes. Already forgotten it. That's science, folks. Ebbinghaus, 1885. What do we do about it as trainers? Absolutely nothing. Nothing. It's absolutely criminal that we ignore this. But to be fair, we don't have those trainers when they leave the course, but we do now because they have mobile phones. So what you can do is use smart algorithms, AI, to decide when you as an individual finish a course, let's say that nursing one. I know that you're going to be hitting A&E in a ward maybe in a month's time. You're going to forget loads of that stuff. So what I do is start feeding you deliberate practice over time, making the course slightly more difficult until you pass, until you sit the exam, go selling your product, go onto a ward if you're a nurse. It's vital that we start taking this principle seriously, and we now have the technology that does it quite well. Another application of AI. Okay, and then the curation. Now this, however, is the big one. The personal adaption of learning to individual learners. This is where AI really plays its big card, okay? So the idea is to educate everyone uniquely. I invested in this company twice, and their markets are by and large the US, but basically, if I want to get data about you as learners, I can get individual data from each one of you, but a more important thing is not that individual data, it's also the aggregated data. Okay? Now I could get some hokey crap like learning styles data, but that wouldn't matter anything because learning styles don't exist. I could get Myers-Briggs data from you, but that's basically a Ponzi scheme, and that data's hopeless as well. So don't imagine for 1 minute that we as a profession have our act together on data. There is nothing in the literature that says learning styles even exist. Never mind they're applicable in the training world. And if you try it, you'll see you will fail on AI because the data is almost irrelevant in terms of its predictive value. Now, a standard course, let's say maths, is a fairly linear thing, like most of the e-learning courses you'll see in these stands around here. Fairly linear, flat. In truth, subjects are more like this. It's a bit messy, okay, with lots of dependencies. And what these systems do, a bit like having a sat-nav. So I live in Brighton. If I drive from Brighton to London and I go off to Haywards Heath by accident, the sat-nav gets me back on piste again. Well, that's what this system does. The AI engine knows you as an individual, has aggregated data, and in real time tries to help you through your learning journey. But everybody has a unique learning journey. So if you're doing a compliance program, those who know a lot about this or have perhaps been on 3 compliance programs before will speed through the course. Those who need more support will get more support and take another route and it'll be a bit slower. So it's massively personalized, just like your sat-nav. And these are real systems being applied in the real world as we speak. So the big trial I was involved in last year was ASU, and we had a rise in attainment from 78 to 94%. If you don't think that is much, in the education world, if you get a 3% rise in efficacy, you're published. You're published, folks. You're Sugata Mitra. Although that's a load of bollocks as well, the hole in the wall. I've been to the hole in the wall. They are literally holes in the wall. Now, not only do you get a rise in attainment, you get a fall in dropout because the two obviously are correlated. Interestingly, what do students think about this? Well, to cut to the quick, the blue and the green are student opinions. They love this stuff compared to the lectures, which half of them don't turn up to. The latest study from Harvard showed that over 10 courses, only 60% of the students were turning up to lectures. 60%. Imagine if that were a restaurant and I had paid for the meal up front and only 60% of the diners turn up. You go, this food's shit, isn't it? But still, we deliver that sort of thing in the educational world because the reason these kids love it is AI is the new UI, you know? This is what they experience when they buy something on Amazon, use Netflix, use Google. This is the world of your learners. AI. It's not the world of this. Fixed. You know when I do e-learning, it feels as though I'm wearing a suit that's about 3 sizes too small. You know, like I'm being forced down these weird channels. It's telling me to do things I don't really want to do. I think we've got to loosen this stuff up a little bit if we're going to succeed. And here's an interesting example. This is a real one. My friend of mine, Andy Wooler from Hitachi. You'll notice the same thing. He uses this technique. He uses a thing called Area 9, another system. Andy is thinking about scrapping courses. There's a weird idea, isn't it, in our world? And he wants to scrap courses because he thinks in the real world, courses are just a trainer construct. He wants to scrap courses because in the real world, what you have is a set of competencies, okay? And actually, when you have a new task, like you're moving into sales, you have a new set of skills to pick up. People don't want courses, they want learning. They want development. The course actually constricts things, doesn't do spaced practice, and results in massive forgetting. So perhaps we should be shattering the concept of a course, which of course AI can do as well. I think this is also true of MOOCs. I was involved in a MOOC in University of Derby. Very interesting, you know that dropout thing? The reason people drop out, and I don't like many MOOCs, is it's built by academics who drip feed you the content over 10 weeks. I don't want that. I want the content when I want the content. I want it all up front. When we did this MOOC on dementia, we noticed that some people went right to module 6, then 3, then 4, they'd bounced out all over the place. 36% retention rate on that book because it was using smart behind-the-scenes intelligence. Best piece of online learning ever? I didn't do this. A friend of mine did. This is for a bank that got a $1 billion fine. So they decided not to spend huge, they spent about $3 million on this. A real simulation for people who are handing out loans, 3D simulation, dealing with the system, dealing with customers. They then harvested the data from the training program, fed it into an AI engine. It produced lots of insights for the management, who then adjusted the system, adjusted the training. So training became a living, breathing experiment within the organization. It isn't the training L&D department, make a course, deliver a course, move on. The training was part of the business cycle, with AI driving the insights. And interestingly, the insights were counterintuitive. One of the insights was that it wasn't people who were handing out very risky loans. Actually, the very opposite was true. It was the people who were risk averse, who were the problem, because they weren't grabbing the good loans. So sometimes the AI engine strips away all that confirmation bias, all that brain stuff, and gives you the truth. And that was the sort of next cycle in that one. Lastly, assessment. You may have seen this on Facebook. If only I had a few more papers to grade, said no teacher ever. I have friends who are teachers and academics, and it takes about 5 minutes before I hear them moaning about marking essays or whatever, you know, especially at Christmas. And my response is, get real, automate it. You know, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you automate assessment? It's madness. Why bitch about it all the time? Just get on and do it. And you can do this even at the level of essays. So MIT have an automated essay system. You feed it with about 100 essays marked by good academics. The machine learning system learns what the rubric is and will mark as good as a human being. Why don't we use this stuff? Actually, the only thing universities use artificial intelligence for is in plagiarism checking. So when kids buy essays, which they increasingly do, submit it, we put it into a plagiarism checker, and that uses AI to see if they've cheated. Isn't that weird that the only thing they're using AI for is checking whether their learners are cheating or not? Rather than being positive about the thing, we're doing the blame game. But there are other things in assessment on AI as well that you may be interested in. So if you've ever done a Coursera course and you take the exam, you do a little typing test at the beginning, and that's a unique fingerprint, okay, about you as an individual. So when you do the exam at the end, it knows you've typed the answers in. That's smart. It's a little algorithm. It's actually quite easy to do, but it's AI. Next generation is face recognition. So if I do a Coursera course, I show my passport, driving ID. It knows I'm Donald when I come back and sit the exam at any future time. We also have real-time facial recognition. This is weird. That actually looks at you while you sit the exam and knows if you're cheating or not. Isn't that weird? Because it's reading, you know, sentiment. It's actually sort of reading your mind to a degree. Okay, that's interesting. If we want to affect online assessment and move on. So, I think, you know, rather than trainers and teachers not being affected by AI, I'd like to ask the other question, switch that round. What are the things you've done as a trainer or teacher that might be better done by AI? I actually think that AI is largely free of gender. I say largely because it still can be infected by that. But believe me, it's incredibly difficult to write a piece of maths or an algorithm that's racist or sexist. You have to really try hard to do that. It's not, you know, the idea that all algorithms are intrinsically sexist and racist is ridiculous. You know, if I write an algorithm that sorts 5 numbers from the smallest to the largest, it's hard to see how that is either sexist or racist. So we have to get away from this constant, you know, dystopian view of everything that's algorithmic. It never forgets. Remember, your brain's forgetting all the time. False memories, all that stuff. It only gets better. Remember, this is machine learning. It's a learner, but a super fast learner. Remember when it beat Go? The most sophisticated game we as a species know? Deep learning? That just became a super fast learner. It never sleeps, tires, gets ill, bored, hangovers, none of that. 24/7, always there. It does things that our brains cannot do because of bias. That's an interesting one. Personalizes, I've shown you that one. This is an interesting one. So in the early, with cogbooks, when we did a course in American history, and we noticed that a lot of the kids were struggling with a couple of the points and questions. And it wasn't that the kids were at fault. The fault was actually the course. Now, who hasn't designed a course with a really bad question in it, or a really bad bit of writing? The good thing about AI is it can actually check it and automatically reset that network I showed you, reset the course to make it better. Isn't that a weird thing? Because we hardly ever do that. We fossilize our courses. You buy all these courses here, they're going to be fossilized, and then they're going to charge you big bucks to change them. Okay? And I'll end on this last slide here, because this blew my mind. This is some time ago, which is in Japan, Todai is not a robot. This research group built an AI engine that passed the Tokyo University entrance exam, and it outperformed all the kids who got into that university, the most difficult exam in the Far East. Why does this matter? Why were they doing this? Well, if you pass the exam, if you're a graduate level smarty pants going in at this level, as sure as damn it, the AI is going to be smart at graduate level as well. So we're looking to a future where these super fast machine learners are going to be better than graduates. Why are we training tens of thousands of lawyers, accountants, when we know the AI is going to be chipping away at those skills? You know, we really have to reset our mind, and this is why it's so important that L&D and HR start thinking about this stuff, because our whole world is the world that's going to be affected most by this, as AI chips away at the things we used to train. And perhaps we really are training for things that will not exist in the future. Okay? So, really frightening thing here. So, I just end with one message for you. Sorry if I've frightened you all to death with this. But AI certainly has its dangers, okay? Massive youth unemployment is not a pretty thing in Spain, and it's not a pretty thing in any part of our planet. So we have to look at political solutions, basic income measures. That's all starting to bubble up now. Trump was elected, I think, because we had automated manufacturing. I think that's the heart of it. I can show you the data if you wish. I think that's what caused Brexit. So as AI destroys, we must, like the god Shiva, look at AI also creating at the same time. And we are in the vanguard of that movement. We can use AI for education and learning, for a future where we can really help people achieve their personal goals and get meaning in their life with smart software. When you go back on your laptop at home, are you really rushing to do that text graphic multiple choice question e-learning course? Or are you on Facebook, Twitter, Netflix, Amazon, or Google? Well, the numbers are clear, all of those. You do that endlessly, and it's all AI. So it's time we took that magic dust from AI and started spreading it across the e-learning world. Or I'll be here in another 5 years' time and see exactly the same LMSs, exactly the same content libraries, exactly the same crappy gamification, children's patronizing nonsense that I've seen for the last 5 years. It's not good enough for our learners. Okay. Thank you very much for listening. I think I've got some time for questions, is that right? No, I have no time for one question. No questions, sorry. If you want to ask me a question, come up and speak to me though. I am a real person, I'm not a bot. Thank you very much.